first time? Do we have any new participants? Anybody here is today your first session? No? Okay, so in that case, everybody knows that we meet every month, and the goal of our network is to bring visibility to coaching supervision, and we have been doing this with Lily for how many years now?
I think we're going into eighth, maybe
Eight
ninth,
years.
something like that.
Yes, and we started with 10, I think, people, and now we are a network of 350 participants. So we are for next year organizing some events and conferences. So we'll let you know in April. Do we have, Lily, some dates for April or for the
Not
digital
yet.
conference?
Not
We
yet.
are we are we are working on that. So we'll let you know when we have the final date, so you can have it in your schedule. And also before the ICF Global Conference that is going to be in California next year, and we're talking with Lily. We know that some people will not maybe want to come to the United States next year to that conference for due to the new president we are going to be having. But if you're planning to come to the ICF Global Conference, we may do something in person the day before. So you may want to plan if we're going to be in October of next year, maybe to come one day earlier. And any other announcements, Lily? We need to.
Registry. So we're opening up the registry for supervisors in January, only once a year. It's labor intense, so if you want to get on the registry or you want to pay for your next year, please reach out to Damien about that.
Yeah, so we are going to open it in January, but we want people to know. So if you want to do that, you can plan ahead.
And please do put where you're calling in from in the chat so Reggie can see where his audience is.
Yes, please, everyone, if we want to say hi and tell us where you're calling from, I think that we're going to also in the chat box, I'm going to share with you Reggie's bio so you can learn more about him. We have the bio also in our newsletter. And Reggie recently got his accreditation with EMCC as a supervisor. So congratulations, Reggie, because it's very recent. So it's great that you were able to obtain that. So congratulations for that. And you want to learn more about him, you can read his bio, but he's a very fun guy, always with great energy, inspiring people. So it's great to have you here, Reggie.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Um, is it me? We ready? Okay. Oh boy. Well, good day. To see everyone. For those of you who don't know me, yes, Damien is correct. There's a lot of laughter that comes from my spirit because we're only here for a flicker, so we may as well have a good time while we're doing it. Side note, and I will talk to you more, Sonny. I just moved my parents in, so yeah. If I look off, it's because one of them is saying something. But this is such an honor to have the opportunity to be with you all today, and you will see more of me as we move into the new year. But I wanted to actually have us have a conversation. So yes, I have some slides, but it's only for content, so we can all share the same information. I decided I didn't want breakouts because I want this to be a rich conversation for all of us to share in one group. So speaking of sharing, I'm going to share my slides. And when you see them, let me know. Now in presentation mode. So can everyone see my slide? Perfect. It should be blank with total brain scoping at the top. All right. So what are we here to talk about? Silent supervision, the mystery of the unspoken. This thought came to me as I was just reflecting on supervision. It's like, man, there's a lot of stuff, and obviously this is me. There's a lot of stuff that happens in that silence. For those of you who don't know, Lily is my supervisor. Can't say enough about her, but there's a lot of silence in that conversation with supervisees that I have the opportunity to work with. A lot of silence there. And so I want to pose for us basically 4 questions today. What is silence? What meaning is made in the silence? What can be created in the silence? And then who are we being in the silence? And that's whether we're a supervisor or a supervisee. And side note, this also applies to group supervision as well. But I wanted to just talk about supervision as a whole, as a practice that we all enjoy. So when I prompt a question, that is your clue to provide responses. I love having conversations about really juicy topics, and I think silence is one of them. And so I thought a lot about silence, and I said, well, so actually, what is silence? So me being a researcher, I did a quick internet search, and Oxford Languages says silence is a complete absence of sound. Like, okay, well, if it's a complete absence of sound, then in the absence, what's present? So I'd like for that to be the first question we ponder. So if silence is the absence of sound, in the absence, what is present? So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. And since we have a fairly small group, it would be great to just come off mute. Sunny, yes.
Good morning. I think energy is present, and I'm not sure that energy really doesn't have sound. I think energy can have sound.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And what is present, I'm saying in the absence, what is present, it has nothing to do with sound. Like, so to your point, energy. Yeah. So what is existing? And maybe that's a better way to phrase the question. In the absence, what is existing in that? So thank you. Yes, energy. Who else?
This is
Yes. I'm trying to see who this is.
Deb raised her hand. Deb, do you want to go?
Yes.
I'm wondering, Reggie, if you want to take this slide down unless we're moving on to other questions immediately, because then we can see each other better.
Oh, okay. How about that?
Yay.
So yeah, in the
Deb,
absence,
Reggie, Deb raised her hand, but I don't think you saw her. Deb, do you want to share some ideas?
Yes, Deb. I was trying to see who that was. I'm so sorry. Hello.
Yeah, I think kind of in line with what everybody has said and written, if used properly, a deep presence is there. But I think there's that if.
Yeah, and in that if, Deb, thank you so much. What as like keeping that question, what could be the if? Brian.
For me, it's resonance.
Anyone else? Yes, Cecilia. I think yes.
Yeah, for me, it's being. I mean, you're being with the supervisee, so it's kind of the co-creation.
Yeah, thank you. Meryl, hi.
Hi, Reggie. So it's a manifestation of trust, for me. It's my trust in the other person, my trust that the space is conducive to reflection, and that really it's okay to be nonverbal and be present physically and emotionally and spiritually instead.
Thank you. Shona Veer, good afternoon.
Yes, good evening, you say. Yeah.
Good evening. Yes.
Okay, so if silence might not be might be absence of sound, but it is full of meaning.
Mm.
It's full of meanings and it's intangible.
Indeed, indeed. And I would assert for all of those intangibles, that is presence. And so I'm going to share back. And so Judy, thank you for the suggestion. I'm going to do my best to share and unshare. So we've had some amazing responses. And so from that, and we kind of talked on this. What meaning is made in the silence? And while there are countless types of silence, the three that I would like for us to focus on is awkward silence, right? And I won't read all of this to you because I know you can read. There's compassionate silence. And then we've all heard silence as golden, so golden silence. And I would assert that we're conditioned to fill silence. And it could be argued that it's perhaps to preserve ego or because we're uncomfortable. And oftentimes when we speak, it can be due to a conscious or even an unconscious desire to bring attention to maybe our knowledge or our intellect. And then another aspect is that maybe we desire acceptance in breaking the silence. I would argue respectfully, this is probably more prevalent in Western cultures, but the presence and influence of culture is undeniable. So there's a lot to be said about those three types of silence and how culture can impact that silence. And then obviously this also applies to supervision. So just as we can be conditioned to fill silence, in coaching and coaching supervision, it conditions us to embrace silence. And so that in itself is a practice as well. So I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you, Judy, so we could see everyone. And just ask, what are your thoughts?
I'm thinking in that silence, we're present for whatever's happening internally for us. Maybe also paying attention outside. But I'm just thinking about like what stories end up getting told inside that silence. And I love that you called out awkward versus compassionate versus golden. There's almost this sense of the emotional energy or direction things were headed before, however we perceived that to be, then sort of continues on being processed in that silence, and where we go with it before we then touch base with each other again is revealing.
Indeed. So much happens in that silence.
Reggie, this element of cultural differences, I think is triggered some spark of interest in my head, because I come from the culture that interrupting somebody is actually sign of interest, that this is a very nice agitated conversation and we are all really deep into this conversation. So I moved for the first time abroad in 1999. I moved to UK, different culture than Polish one, and I remember that it was labeled as a sign of being impolite. And it was such a difficult element for me because and still when Polish people meet, even here living in the US, we just talk over each other, and it shows that we are very comfortable with each other. So silence is as well, I think, culturally important and it's important for me as a supervisor because sometimes the silence might be the sign of comfort with me as a supervisor. Sometimes it might be the sign of discomfort with me. And I might look at it from the lenses of biases I have in my head, either culturally embedded or like learned behaviors, my expectation towards silence. So I'm thinking about that. And I'm thinking as well how, like, you know, authority or power dynamic shows up in silence, because I feel that I would love to have partnering in supervision. And it might carry some meaning about maybe the silence is there as the sign to respect towards authority instead of the sign of respect, of reflection. There are so many different things to unpack there when we think about cultural differences. So thank you, Reggie, for bringing this question or layer of cultural understanding of silence.
Yeah. Thank you. And shameless plug, you're one of the people I thought about when I thought about silence and culture. And this is, you know, even though it's a conversation we have a lot about, there's so much conversation to have about it. And just in the United States, the nuance of culture is prevalent. So then we multiply that across continents, and that can be fascinating. Who else?
I'd also
Yes,
like to
Erica.
add, yeah, I mean, what Indigo described as her own culture, like coming from my own culture, it's like silence is respect, silence is, you know, giving respect and authority to the person who, you know, you're in a relationship with. And so interruption would feel like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Right. And then I think even in this American culture, just this idea of like, we're so busy, like there's so much, you know, in our heads, monkey brain, all of that, right? And just how do I bring into that space a pause, a place to reflect and allowing whatever emerges and observe what's emerging, not just for myself, but also for my supervisee, and letting them walk into that space, whether it's uncomfortable or it's, and discerning, like, you know, what is it that they need in the moment for themselves and even for myself as a supervisor. So I think I love this conversation around silence because I feel like we don't cultivate that enough in our American culture, and really taking for myself a space of like, I need to cultivate that for myself so I can get comfortable with silence and providing that for my clients.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Brian. And then Cecilia, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks. So I am struck about having a conversation about silence, but anyway, that's one of the ironies of it all. However, you know, again, about perspective and traditions, in many spiritual traditions, silence is a place of nothing. And I wonder how that concept fits with our desire to label kinds of silence or to call silence something.
Yeah, I forget who said it, but something loosely along the lines of, once we define something, it has not lost its meaning, but, you know, by defining, we confine. Thank you, Brian. Cecilia, Genevieve, I see you too.
Interesting that this topic came up, but I was thinking, I do a lot of meditation, and in meditation there is a lot of silence. And one of the things when we do a meditation in a group is something that we call drishti, and it's in that silence is looking at somebody else in the center of the forehead, and you're in that conversation really engaging in silence, but exchanging a lot of beautiful moments, beautiful emotions. So it's very, very powerful what silence can become in those spaces.
Yeah, thank you. Genevieve?
Yes, thank you, Cecilia, because I'm going to build a little bit on what you said. In some culture, silence is also a way to deeply connect and also let some processes, like emotional processes, to unfold before talking. Because sometimes we might be impacted by something, and if we talk, it will be impulsive. So we need to just let it down, come down before talking. So that's why silence can be very important and useful in supervision and even in any other conversation.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Is it Teresa or Teresa? I want to be
Teresa.
Teresa. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reggie. I agree with everything that the colleagues are mentioning. But I am going back to, okay, we in supervision or in coaching or in a mentoring no, but coaching and supervision, we're with then another one, right? So silence is a very powerful tool, but sometimes the other, not us, but the other is uncomfortable. It's feeling awkward with silence. So in my practice, what I try to do is start with silence, but if I see the other like is not feeling awkward, then I will say that the important is to ask how silence is working for them, right?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Meryl.
So I'm glad you brought up the awkward, because I think some of the cultural things are some awkwardness of crossing that, what is needed here. And for me, as it took me such a long time, I'm still recovering from being a consultant many years ago, to outlast the temptation to add value. And that temptation, can think that I think it's sort of like others are saying, it's like, is that really a contribution, or could that be a detraction in this moment? And I think that's so who was speaking? Oh, Cecilia, thank you for talking about the meditation, because it took me such a long time to acquire this discipline, because it really is a discipline of, counseling oneself in the moment. And, Damian knows I'm always trying to add value. And, it's like when he and I were on the ICF board together, I'm always adding my 2 cents. And, I had to dispense with that. And supervision actually helped me, not receiving supervision, but actually doing it. It gave me a purpose for the silence in a completely new way. And
how so?
So, in early coaching, you maybe heard the same kind of thing, said like outlast your client's desire for silence, outlast it, because that shows your trust in their wisdom. So, okay, I had that, but the other is, it's an unknown space. The silence is a real unknown space, and that's a challenge for people claiming knowledge. So if I claim this knowledge, I want to go where I can use the knowledge, as opposed to step into the unknown, take that leap into the unknown. But that's what the supervisee is always doing. So how can I not do that? So I really love this topic, and I'm going to follow you around like a puppy now and see how you're doing it everywhere.
Thank you. It's so interesting that you said what you said, because I noticed a nonverbal response, but still a vocal response as you were sharing, I was like, okay, now I'm breaking silence. So just being aware in that moment of who I'm being and what I'm doing. But Leanne says, and I want to read this, I'm guessing it depends on your level of nervous system regulation as to how much silence you can tolerate. And as I read that, I was thinking about, so I have 6 grandchildren, and my oldest is 17. And I remember when she was little, her mother would say, my daughter would say, Cheyenne, you need to be patient. Because you're like, Mommy, blah, 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 blah. So you need to be patient. So what is patience? Patience means to wait. Okay, so you need to wait. And so in that waiting, there's this discipline to not necessarily anticipate, but just to, I'll say in our language, to invite what comes next. And I don't remember who said it because so many people have commented, but in doing so, obviously we want to be mindful, we want to be respectful, but it's unknown. So this thought of dancing in the moment when you don't even know what music is playing can sometimes be hilarious. And so therein lies sometimes the awkward silence. Judy says, what are we tuning into during that silence? You know, we could have this conversation all day. But I want to go back to sharing and another question to pose is what can be created in the silence. Now I know we've added to that, but again, what can be created in the silence? And I have another question coming up, so I'm interested to hear what other people have to say. Sunny, good morning.
Okay, I don't know what's actually you said it was an unknown, and I believe it is, but I also listened to what other people were saying, and what becomes before the silence and what comes after silence kind of like are bookends to this space that's created. And then in terms of supervision, what's going on for the supervisor and the supervisee during that space period helps to define what that silence really means. I mean, I'm a very visual person, so I see it as a container in and of itself. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Like the project manager in me thinks it depends, right? Who knows? But that's the beauty of the question, because then it gives us the ability and the opportunity to either make that determination or to explore it from that standpoint. Like, I don't know what can be. Well, it depends. Okay, it depends on what.
But I think that's part of the charge, and the purpose in supervision is to bring all that together, to give that space, the silent space, definition and meaning, which I think that's what Jean-Audier was talking about, you know, actually giving it meaning.
Yeah, and in the absence of evidence or information, how hilarious it is that we foster our own meaning, like we manufacture it. Either it is so and so, or maybe it's, because we don't know.
But isn't that where the co-creation comes in? I'm just saying
it does.
That's where co-creation comes in. I think someone else was talking about partnering with the supervisee and not to just do it in your own head.
Yeah, and that's also that's the discipline in the practice, is to not, and of course, I'm making a general statement. We're all aware we have bias, but sometimes we're not aware of what bias is present in that silence as well as we're making meaning. So Inga and Damien, I see your hand too, sir. Inga, go ahead, please.
So I would like to challenge this notion, Reggie, that we don't have data or information that this is unknown in supervision, because most of the coaches who participate in supervision, they have some kind of ICF training. I noticed that usually coaches who say yes to supervision, they are more experienced than less experienced. And there is a huge impact on working with silence in ICF training. So we can expect that even if the person is like me, culturally biased to talk over somebody, I will learn how to do it, even if it's uncomfortable. So I can have some data. With coaching is a little bit different. I actually remember even clients who told me, like everybody tells me meditate, but I can only do guided meditation when somebody talks, because it's so uncomfortable just to observe my own breathing. But when I work as a supervisor, people are definitely more comfortable, and I am as well more comfortable. And I think that this data we have is ICF competencies.
And in the challenge, which I'm sure we all accept the challenge, then there comes the question, rhetorical or not, so yes, there's all this information. How do you know which information is present at that time for you to draw from? And so we could spend all afternoon, morning, or whatever. But I love that, because the whole purpose of this conversation, at least for me, was to have us come together and share what our thoughts are and hear what others have to say. So Damien, your hand was up. I know you took it down, but I'm sure you still have something.
Briefly, I really appreciate this space, because I was reflecting on silence. What I think, answering your question, what was exactly the question, Reggie, that you asked us?
What can be created in the silence?
What can be created in the silence is an opportunity for reflection. And it's interesting because I feel, I don't know if I'm older or what, but I feel more comfortable now than when I was younger in general in my life with silence. And sometimes I also see silence as an opportunity to challenge our clients. So Teresa, you were talking about sometimes people feel uncomfortable about it. And when that happened, I believe that I don't have a negative connotation about that, or the contrary. When people are uncomfortable about silence, what a great opportunity for people to be in this uncomfortable place of reflecting or not knowing what to say or whatever it is. But I started to enjoy silence, even when people are uncomfortable. And it's interesting because when you do that, even though many people may not like it or enjoy it or feel that something is wrong, because many times the interpretation is something is wrong with the silence. It can be a great opportunity to challenge our clients, our supervisees to go deeper. But I think first we need to be comfortable with it.
Yeah. And Judy, I would love to have a conversation about discomfort, because I would assert there's a practice and a discipline in being uncomfortable with the discomfort, and not even for the sake of it becoming comfortable, but just for the awareness itself. Like, I'm noticing I'm uncomfortable. And sometimes just sitting with that, because there's nothing to fix necessarily. Lily says, I was so inspired by learning that the oldest trees in the world, let me open this up. Oldest trees in the world, brittle pine cones, 5,000 years old, are so long living because of harsh environment discomfort. Yeah. How about that? Oh, okay. I'm going to go back to sharing. Newsflash, we won't get a chance to go through everything that I wanted to, but that's certainly okay. Maybe a softball question, but are there different types of silence in coaching supervision? Are there different types of silence? And it's a direct question intentionally, because I know I know we have our own thoughts and opinions. So, yes, Deb.
Yeah, I think when I'm coaching or supervising, you can sense when a silence is being used for reflection versus there's kind of nothing there. And I love it when you can literally see the gears moving. And so you just kind of sit back and allow the processing, so that's kind of my favorite kind of silence.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Who else? Brian, yes, sir.
Yes, thanks. So, with risk of typing silence again, I think in both coaching and supervision, what can be created is what's ever ready to be spoken about, what emerges, a place for that. So I don't think that answers the question, but so maybe I'm thinking, no, there's no difference. Same thing happens in both coaching and supervision. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that, thank you. I would say the beauty in this conversation, though, is there's no right or wrong answer. There's just the answer. So, Dr. Sylvia, what's your cat's name? Please.
This is Shadow. He's very
Hello, Shadow.
elderly now, so he is enjoying cuddling up.
Right where he wants to be, huh?
So I'm thinking that my background is being trained as a doctor, and there's research that shows that the average time it takes for a doctor to interrupt the patient who's trying to tell their story is 15 seconds, because you're supposed to get them in and out the room in a short time. So it took me a very, very long time to learn to be quiet, as some of you others have said, from different backgrounds. And looking at it both ways, I remember the first time I was on the receiving end of somebody sitting in silence, a therapist or a coach. To begin with, I thought, what am I paying you for, to sit here with nothing going on? And I wonder how much our clients think that. And as I learnt to do it, well, again, both ways round, as I learnt to do it or feel slightly less uncomfortable, I realized that it gave me time to think. And I also observed when I was coaching and supervising that if my client said something and I took it somewhere, and obviously we can choose all sorts of places we might take something, that was my agenda. Whereas if I just shut up, they would then take it somewhere, and usually it was somewhere that I wasn't expecting it to go, which was often very helpful.
Indeed. Thank you. Richard.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. The other day I had an interesting type of silence. It was a prickly, offended, uncomfortable type of silence in a supervision. And that really helped me tune into the relationship. I find, and after sitting in that for a while, and we both sort of experienced that, it's like something's changed between us. What's going on here? And that then helped unpick some interesting stuff.
So Richard, in that prickliness, for you, what did you become aware of that had you wonder or surmise it was the relationship?
Really interesting question. I was intensely uncomfortable, but I also knew it wasn't all coming from me. And the thought that kept me there was, perhaps this is the work we need to do.
Mm.
Perhaps this is indicating the work that needs to happen in this relationship right now, even though it's uncomfortable. And so the work comes through working this out in the supervisor-coach relationship. We may be able to create an awareness of what's going on in the coach-client relationship. And so my job is to stick with this, to explore it, to be curious, not to get dragged in. And my, oh my, that really stretched me.
Congratulations. Oh, thank you. Jane.
I have been sitting in my silence and feeling the silence. And I've been feeling it right here in the heart center. So it's compassionate silence. It's calming silence, hopefully conveyed to whomever I'm speaking with, the other. And what's so interesting, when I went to raise my hand and I let off these hands flying, it broke my silence. I didn't have to say anything. It broke my silence. And I was worried that it interrupted other people's where they were. And so I think to explore the nonverbals of silence is really fascinating.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Alicia. Oh, you're on mute, ma'am. There you go.
A lot of years ago, I would be in silence, but not truly, because my internal conversation was going on all the time. And I noticed when my mentor said, Alicia, you are not really in silence, that I could understand what he meant. Now I find myself, after mentoring and after supervision, with two types of silence. One, it can be observing the client. I am not real in silence, but I am out of myself, looking at what he does, looking at and maybe interpreting what he does and what he seems to be thinking. And the other one that I find it's rich for both of us is really maintaining a true silence, being comfortable with the silence and not speaking at all until he speaks or she speaks. So in those moments, I think that I would say magic appears in a different way.
Judy.
As Richard was speaking, thank you, Richard, for that beautiful description. It struck me that I have this sort of like mysterious, why is it that both supervision and team coaching feel really, I love them both in a very similar way. And as Richard was sharing, and this question of silence is before us, it struck me that one of the big similarities between the two for me is that there's an awareness of multiple systems and multiple points within those systems in the room with us, very intentionally, both in team coaching, because they might actually be in the room with us, but also within supervision, because we've got that 7-eyed supervision model or whatever we bring to it, but we're aware of a universe in a different way than we might be with coaching. It's a much more a part of the fabric of what we do. And within that silence, we're then, thank you, Richard, for that beautiful description again, able to tune into what's mine, what's the others, what might be coming in from the system. And it's that beautiful eyes 4, 5, and 6 moment to become aware, and as Alicia was just describing, how do we tune into all of those, and what do we do with that?
Jane says, when I choose silence, it allows me to truly see the other and hold compassion and care. I can feel my presence inviting the other to join me. Nice. All right. One one other thing to bring into the conversation is, well, we already did that. So, so we still have some time left. Excuse me. I wanted to share, and for many of you, this is a part of my learning. So the 7 conversations model of supervision. So we have the coach's reflection, the client's reflection, the coach's internal unspoken reflections, the spoken dialogue, the client's internal unspoken dialogue, the coach's reflection after the dialogue, and the client's reflections after the dialogue. So, and this is taken from Coaching and Mentoring Supervision. I wanted to talk about, or have us talk about, actually, 3 and 5. So the coach's internal unspoken reflections during the dialogue, and the client's internal unspoken reflections during the dialogue. Excuse me. So in the coach's internal unspoken reflections during the dialogue, what this model says is there's the inner directed, as in, how am I helping? So that's one of the things the supervisor is asking of themselves. How am I helping? What's the quality of my listening? What am I observing or hearing? What am I missing? Is my intuition turned on? And what assumptions am I making? And how might these be acting as a filter on my listening and my understanding? So I want to keep this up for just a moment and ask you to, for and within yourself, in these questions, whichever question resonates the most, what are your thoughts?
I think I find it relatively easy now listening to the coachee or supervisee to hear their assumptions coming through. And nearly impossible to tell what mine are. I think they all sit in my blind spot.
Oh.
And so I find having supervision helps me get there, but even after lots of practice, I'm not sure I'm getting any further with trying to work out what they are for myself.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, you mentioned your blind spot. In your experience, what has been, what has allowed illumination to a blind spot that you finally revealed, or that you finally realized was a blind spot?
I think it's a combination of the skill of the supervisor or the therapist and the opportunity to have the time and space to think and to verbalize. So for me, if I do that enough times, I can begin to do that for myself. And I stress the just begin, but only if I have the time and the space, which are often in a bit short supply in our modern world. So I have to be very conscious to make the time and the space.
Yeah. Inga.
So this question about assumptions, what assumptions, reminded me very painful discovery that I am a judgmental person, that I discovered it through therapy. And sometimes what is painful is the biggest blessing we can get. And I know that listening and silence are not my natural behaviors. These are all learned behaviors. So thank you for the reminder that silence for me might be the space as well as a supervisor to check in with myself? What assumption? Because yeah, I can see somebody else's assumptions because I listen to them. That's my role. This is what I do. But the silence might be as well a good space for me to check in. You know that about yourself, that you might have a tendency, automatic tendency to jump into things like that, maybe stronger than other people. So why not to check in? And that's a great reminder as well. Yeah. Because sometimes I might hide my own biases as the intuition. It's so easy to my intuition telling me, but this is really my own kind of bias I'm having. Yeah. So yeah.
Yes. Yes, that is hilarious. We think we've come to this great awareness when in actuality it's just that gremlin rearing its head. Okay, so Lily says if we accept non-duality and if there's something in the space, is it mine, yours, or ours? And then followed up by why do we, oh, hold on, wait a minute. Why do we need to decide who it belongs to? That sounds so much like you. Okay, to Judy, do you wonder if we want to be aware of and own our biases, or at least name that there may be something floating around and get curious where it comes from and what meaning or use we want to make of it, if any. It also helps me tune into disconnects versus assuming universality and get curious about those and use them as cues. Yeah. Meryl says, Inga, yes, I wonder if our cherished narrative supervisor and supervisee hold about self and others can be surfaced by either party in the supervision partnership and even built into the agreement. Oh, Meryl, please say more.
So I was thinking this whole idea of maybe, I think this discussion kicks the notion of which role do I hold in the supervision to the curb. So because as people have been saying, either one of us, or maybe if you're also doing group supervision or a team supervision, if I walk in with my historical narrative, somebody needs, I may not see it, as people were saying, the blind spot. So I think it's almost like, please, let's everyone be aware that we all come with a certain narrative, and that narrative may not be dispelled in this session unless we willingly say to each other or to ourselves, if you hear something in what I'm saying or not saying, and you feel it, you not only the right, I learn from that, so something about I like very much like the blind spot on either side, that is okay territory. It's not on either side. Because I've had supervisors, for example, were psychologists who I could feel go into a therapy mode with me. And I remember recoiling, but not speaking right away about it. And it took me a while to register what had happened to me, because it felt the unequalness of it. And so I maintained silence, but not a good one. So that's what I'm thinking. That has to happen way in the beginning. Like, what is allowable? Not only allowable, but totally welcome. And I would consider that another, growth opportunity for me as a supervisor.
Yeah, we all hear people in our head from time to time. And I just heard Damien in my head, contracting, right? So like the agreement, like what have we, and not to place blame, but just in our own reflection, what did I leave out, or what did we not discuss? And if we didn't, once we discover it, we may be able to identify where the disconnect was created. And so having the safe space, Meryl, for you to say, oh, that just felt very therapy to me just now. And for the other to have not had the conversation to say, you know, just so you know, from time to time, I may reach back because of habit and say or do X. And if I do, please let me know, because that is not my intention. So, yeah.
Let me know, and also let me know if it's helpful.
Right.
Right. It might be like, bring your therapy hat in right now because I need it.
Exactly. Because just because I'm uncomfortable, I didn't like it, doesn't mean I didn't need it. Yeah. Pass the castor oil, please. Brian says, thanks, Inga, for calling in the tension between assumptions and intuition. Yes. Is she still here? Did Inga leave?
Had to leave.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry. All right. Oh, it's 11:57. One thing I want to not necessarily leave you with, but one thing I would invite you to also reflect on, and this is number 5. I'm going to blow through this. Number 5, which is the client's internal unspoken reflections during the dialogue. So this is a shared activity. We've talked about that. The coach extends the invitation to the client to create awareness regarding their skills of self-observation. For example, who are you being, and or what limitations are you placing on yourself? We just talked about this. I could not have teed this up any better. And then how would you answer the same question? And finally, what assumptions or filters am I applying in answering the coach's questions? So this actually brings us almost to the end, or at least for pausing. I would love to come back and finish, and not finish this, but continue this at some point, because I had, even though I knew we would have rich conversation, I had no idea that it would carry to this point. So thank you, everyone, for this. I am certainly richer for it. I hope you are as well. I'm going to turn it over to you, Lily.
Wow, what a fascinating conversation. I loved it. I loved the different perspectives. I loved the different ideas that came up. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And yeah, continue the conversation for sure. And we'll get Judy in to talk about discomfort and what that's all about in our space. Let's dive into some of these topics some more. So our next session is December 16th. This is our annual year-end get-together, just to gather, say hello, close the year in a good way, so we can start up the next year. So hope to see you then.
This is an opportunity for connection. So we hope you can make it. And Reggie, this is exactly what we want in the space, an opportunity to reflect together and learn together versus like a lecture. And Lily and I all the time are inviting all members of this community to present. So as we prepare the schedule for next year of different activities for every month, if you're interested, you have a topic that you would like to facilitate a conversation like today Reggie did, please let Lily and I know, because it's a space that we all create together. So thank you, Reggie, very much.
Yeah, we'll call it part 2.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thank you, Damian and Lily.
Fantastic conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful
Thank
to
you
be here.
all. Bye-bye.